Jasper and I were driving through southern West Virginia, early October. I was 32, burned out from work in Louisville and too wired to sit still. Jasper had just gone through a nasty breakup. We used to be close growing up, same summers, same bikes, same dumb injuries, but hadn't spent real time together in years. So we grabbed a paper map, a couple of folded-up state park brochures, and started heading south without much of a plan. We stuck to the small highways, the ones that wind through towns with names like Ashrock or Denlow. We'd stop for gas station coffee, pick a random dot on the map, and drive till it got dark. It was one of those trips where everything starts to blur together. Tree tunnels, country diners, the smell of wet leaves in the air. But I remember the fourth day clearly. We'd passed through a town called Brinley just after lunch. 2 gas stations, one closed, one somehow selling both bait and wedding dresses, and figured we could make it down past the Greenfield line before sunset. That part of the state is just ridges and woods. Long gaps between anything. No cell reception for most of it. We saw a handmade sign nailed to a tree that said, Lusk Hollow, 13 miles. Never made it there. Jasper was behind the wheel. I had my seat reclined, boots on the dash, nodding off while the road did its thing. It was rough blacktop, cracked with the occasional patch of gravel. Trees pressed close on both sides, real tight, like the forest had just taken the road back but forgot to finish the job. Then we passed a faded wooden sign that said, Old Sorrel Trailhead, 1 mile. It looked like someone had tried to carve over the name at some point, but the words were still readable. Right after that, things got weird. The car didn't die, but it gave this weird lurch, like we'd hit a puddle. Only the road was dry. Jasper slowed down, tapped the brakes. Then the steering wheel got stiff, like he was fighting it just to stay straight. We thought maybe something had jammed under the car, or the power steering was shot. He pulled off to the side. We got out. Everything looked totally normal. Tires were fine. No leaks. Engine wasn't even hot. We were about to get back in when Jasper stopped and pointed into the woods. At first, I thought he was just messing with me. There was this small figure off in the brush. Still, just standing there. I thought maybe a deer, or a kid, but the shape was off. Too narrow, head too big. It wasn't doing anything, just standing there facing us. I said something, just a simple, "Hey, you okay?" But it didn't move. Then we heard a loud crack behind us, like someone stepping hard on a dead branch. We spun around. Nothing. When we turned back, the figure was gone. Neither of us said much. Jasper just got in and turned the key. The engine coughed, then started, but the dash lights flickered, and the radio came on by itself. Just static. He turned it off. We eased back onto the road, slower now. The woods felt tight. Not dark exactly, just heavy. 5 minutes later, we hit a fork in the road we didn't remember seeing before. No signs. No arrows. Just 2 roads, each disappearing into trees. GPS had no signal. Phone said no service. We guessed left because we'd been heading south. About 20 minutes later, we passed the same Old Sorrel Trailhead sign again. Same dip in the trees. Same cracked stretch of pavement. Same tight curve. We laughed it off at first, probably looped around. Maybe the road curled and reconnected somewhere, but then it happened again. Third time around, Jasper went quiet, hands gripping the wheel tighter. He said, "Don't talk, just look." I watched the woods. Nothing moved, but it didn't feel empty. It felt like it was holding something back. We passed the same exact junk on the side of the road, a rusted-out truck bed, a tipped-over kid's chair, a fire hydrant that made no sense being out there. Every time, same order. Like props set out for a play. Fourth pass, Jasper pulled over and turned off the car completely. He didn't say anything for a long time. Then finally he said, "We're not moving until something changes." We just sat there. 10 minutes maybe, engine ticking as it cooled down. No wind, no birds, no sound at all. Then the radio came on again. We hadn't touched it, no key in the ignition. It wasn't music this time, just a man's voice. Slow, calm, like he was preaching or reading something old. The words didn't make sense, definitely not English. Not even anything that sounded like a language I knew, more like rhythm than meaning. Jasper shut it off. It came back on. He pulled the keys out. Still playing. I leaned forward, found the battery connector under the dash, and yanked it loose. The voice cut out. Then the headlights blinked on. That was enough. We bailed. No bags. No phones. Just started walking back the way we came, fast. The forest didn't change. Trees. Road. Trees. Repeat. I couldn't shake the feeling that if we stopped, something would catch up. We walked until our legs started to ache. Then we saw a light barely there, flickering through the trees off to the right. It turned out to be a cabin, or maybe a hunting shack. Wooden walls, tin roof, lantern on a hook by the door. No vehicle. No path leading up to it. Jasper knocked. Nothing. I pushed the door. It opened. Inside, the place was empty except for a single narrow bed and a table. On the table was a map, hand-drawn, crumpled, and covered in red circles. I picked it up. Our road wasn't on it, but the word Sarl was. Circled 3 times. Big red loops like someone wanted to make sure you couldn't miss it. We left it there. Backed out slow. That's when we heard the branch snap again, deep in the woods behind the cabin. Same sharp crack. Too loud to be nothing. We ran. At some point the trees thinned and gravel turned to pavement again. Eventually we spotted headlights. A tow truck coming from the opposite direction. We flagged him down. He asked what we were doing out there in the dark with no lights, no gear. We told him the car broke down. He gave us a long look, then said, "Ain't been a road back there since the mudslide." That was, 3 years ago? He towed us into Farlow. The mechanic checked everything. Battery, steering, electrical. Said the car was fine. Perfect, actually. We drove back home the next morning. Took the big highways. Didn't talk much. Every now and then, usually when we've had a few drinks, Jasper will look at me and ask if I ever figured out what Old Sorel was. I tell him the truth. I looked it up once. Not a trail. Not even a park. Just a family name from a ghost town that doesn't exist anymore. Burned down in the early 1900s. Whole place gone. No survivors. Just stories. About people who tried to live too far into the woods, and something that didn't let them leave. Elias had this spot in mind somewhere out past Ridge Hollow. It's not on any tourist map, he kept saying, like that was a good thing. Way out there, but not like Deliverance out there. Mira just rolled her eyes and brought snacks and a paper map she probably found in her grandma's glove box. I tossed a hoodie in a backpack and didn't ask too many questions. Drive, hike a little, maybe take some dumb pictures for proof we went outside. We left early Saturday morning. It was still dark when I locked up my apartment. Elias picked us up in his hybrid, and we were on Route 34 before the sun had really decided to show up. The further we got from town, the quieter it got. Just the occasional truck or deer warning sign and a lot of rustling trees. Cell service disappeared by mid-morning. None of us were too bothered. Elias had the route saved offline, and Mira kept acting like she was born in a ranger station, flipping open that paper map like it had treasure on it. It actually kind of made me feel better, having something you couldn't accidentally close or lose signal on. We were maybe 2 hours in when we saw this little pull-off. Nothing dramatic, just a gravel patch where 2 narrow dirt roads met, with an old metal signpost stuck in the ground. No words on it, just an arrow pointing left. The sign was so weathered, it looked like it had been sanded down by a century of rain. Elias slowed the car and said, "This is it." Mira looked at the map again. "This isn't a road," she said. "Seriously, there's no road here." "Maybe it's just not marked anymore," I said, which in hindsight was a pretty dumb thing to say, but it didn't seem like a big deal at the time. We'd already been improvising most of the morning. One left turn didn't seem like it would matter. So we turned. At first, it was fine. Just a narrow-trailed gravel winding between trees. But about a mile in, the gravel disappeared. The road turned into hard red clay, smooth, like it had been packed by machinery but not used in a long time. The trees changed too. I don't know how else to explain it. They got denser, taller, and they leaned inward like they were tired and giving up. It got dark fast. Not because it was late, but because the canopy above us was almost solid. And the trees weren't all the same either. Some had peeling bark that hung off in strips, like paper that had gotten wet and dried weird. Others curved sideways before straightening again, like they'd been twisted mid-growth. It looked like a bunch of different forests had been stitched together by someone who didn't understand trees. We didn't see a single other car. No cabins, no trash, no beer cans or tire ruts, just red clay and silence. Elias was visibly uncomfortable. He kept fidgeting with the vents and glancing at the dashboard. "You guys hot?" he asked. "AC's blasting, but I feel like I'm roasting." I was starting to feel it too. It was cold air technically, but it didn't help. I wiped my forehead and kept looking out the window, trying to find something, anything that would make the road make sense. But it all looked the same. Then Mira leaned between the seats. "Okay, did we just pass that tree before?" She pointed to this bent old oak with a knot at the base that looked like a clenched fist. And yeah, I recognized it. I didn't want to say anything, but it was the kind of tree you remember. We hadn't turned around. There weren't any curves. The road had been straight for at least 10 minutes, but 10 minutes later, it was there again. Same tree. Elias pulled over. We all got out, standing in the middle of the road like tourists who'd lost the trail. There was no wind, no bird calls, no bugs buzzing. It felt like the whole place had taken a breath and just never let it out. Mira didn't say anything. She just started walking ahead on her own, slow but steady, like she needed to prove something. She disappeared around a curve maybe 100 yards up. We waited. 2 minutes. Then 5. Elias called her name. Nothing. We followed, jogging a little now, and found her standing still in the road, staring at the ground like it had insulted her. "What is it?" I asked. She just pointed. A shirt. Gray and red flannel, folded perfectly, like someone had ironed it and placed it there on purpose, sitting right in the middle of the road, like an offering. And on top of it, a digital watch, still ticking. I bent down and picked it up. The screen was scratched, but it worked. The time was exactly 3 hours ahead of what it should have been. The date said October 29th, but we'd left the house that morning on the 28th. "Check your phone," Elias said, barely keeping it together. No signal. But the time had jumped. Same as the watch. Mira held up hers. Mine too. It changed. We turned around. The car was gone, not moved, gone. Like it had never existed. Just empty road and trees that didn't feel right anymore. No prints, no tire marks, nothing. The gravel shoulder was untouched. I felt it hit me in the chest. Real full-body panic. Not the kind that makes you scream, just the kind that freezes you in place because suddenly nothing makes sense anymore. We started walking. One direction. Back, we thought. Should have taken us straight to the split. 15 minutes in, there it was again. The shirt. Same fold, same spot. The watch on top. Now 4 hours ahead. I threw it into the woods without thinking. It landed somewhere out of sight, hitting branches on the way down. My hands were shaking. Then Mira said, "There's someone watching us." And she wasn't wrong. Up the hill, between 2 trees, was a shape. It looked human, sort of, but stretched wrong. Too tall, slouched. The arms hung low, almost like they were weighted. The face, I don't even know how to describe it, just blank. Like whoever built it had seen people once and done their best from memory. It didn't move. We ran. We didn't talk. We didn't talk. Didn't yell. Just ran. Branches slapping our faces, our feet slipping on the clay. I could hear Elias behind us at first, then nothing. I turned around. No sound. No sign of him. Gone. Myra grabbed my arm, gasping. "Don't stop. Don't stop. Just go." We kept running until we hit a creek, narrow, maybe ankle deep, with cold water and smooth stones on the bank. It looked normal. That's the only way I can put it. Everything else had felt wrong. But the creek felt like something from back home. We followed it. It could have been hours. I stopped checking the time. Every now and then, I'd see flashes in the water, not my reflection, not Mira's, something else. Just shapes, faces that weren't ours. We didn't speak. I don't even think we could. Eventually, we found a road, real pavement with faded yellow lines and broken branches along the edge. I almost laughed when I saw it. About 10 minutes later, a white pickup came around the bend. The guy behind the wheel looked like someone's grandfather. He leaned out the window and said, "You two okay?" We broke down. Full sobbing. He didn't ask too many questions. just drove us into a town called Keyburn, about 20 miles out. They never found Elias. No car, no shirt, no tracks, not even a broken branch. We stayed in town 2 more nights, just in case. On the second night, I found something on the floor of our motel room. It hadn't been there when we left. The watch, same one, still ticking, now 8 hours ahead. I left it there. We checked out before sunrise. Mira didn't say anything, just grabbed her bag and followed me to the car, and we never went back. My friend Theo and I had been on the road for a little over 2 weeks, making our way through the Appalachian region. It wasn't some grand expedition or anything, just a loosely planned road trip. We started in southern Ohio and figured we'd wind our way down through the mountains to northern Georgia. That was about as specific as our itinerary got. We had Theo's beat-up old Pathfinder, a couple of tents, and a camera he'd borrowed from his cousin. Mostly we were looking for cool spots to shoot, weird small towns, and quiet places to camp. It was early October, the exact point when all the trees start showing off. Bright orange, crimson, deep gold, like the whole forest had hit peak drama. We'd been taking back roads as much as possible, not because it was faster, but because we liked not knowing exactly where we were half the time. Something about driving without cell service made it feel more like an actual adventure. The night before had been rough. We camped just over the border in Kentucky, and it poured for hours. We woke up soaked, the floor of the tent a swamp, and both of us cranky and cold. We didn't even make breakfast. Just packed up everything wet and hit the road. By the time we crossed into Tennessee, Theo was out cold in the passenger seat, curled against the window like a cat. I was driving. We hadn't had a signal in miles, and it was just me, the road, and that soft white noise of tires on pavement. We passed a collapsed drive-in theater at one point, the screen just a jagged frame now, and a church that had clearly been through a fire. You start to see places like that after a while. Towns that feel like they just stopped being towns and became relics no one ever bothered to clean up. Then I saw the sign. Willow Creek, 2 miles. It looked handmade. White paint, wood posts, slightly tilted. I turned off without thinking. I figured we'd stretch, maybe find a diner where we could sit for a bit and dry out. The town didn't look deserted. That's what threw me. It wasn't lively, but there were signs of life. Some houses had cars in the driveways, and the lawns weren't overgrown. There was a small diner on the corner with a flickering neon sign that only said Penn because the O had given up. I parked out front, and that's when Theo finally stirred. He blinked at the windshield. "Where the hell are we?" "Willow Creek," I said. "Supposedly." He gave me that slow, skeptical look and stretched. "Is this a real place or one of those towns that disappears when you blink?" "Guess we'll find out." The diner was just what you'd expect. Long counter, checkered floor, booths with cracked vinyl seats. It smelled like grease and coffee, which was exactly what we wanted. A woman behind the counter looked up when we walked in, like she'd been waiting for us. There was one other person in the place, an older guy sitting by the window, not eating or drinking, just staring out like the parking lot was going to do something. "You two headed south?" the woman asked. I paused. "Yeah. Trying to get to Asheville." She didn't ask anything else, just poured 2 mugs of coffee and slid them over without a word. Then she said, "Keep your eyes open on Route 21. This time of year folks tend to disappear." Theo gave me this exaggerated look, like, "Oh, cool, we've entered the plot now." But the woman didn't seem like she was joking. She just went back to wiping down the counter. We barely touched the coffee. It tasted burnt and metallic, like it had been sitting on the burner since the Clinton administration. Paid in cash place didn't even pretend to have a card reader. Back at the car, I tried to pull up the map. Nothing. Just a green smear of forest. No town name, no nearby roads. I shrugged it off. Dead zones weren't exactly rare out there. Once we got back on Route 21, the landscape started feeling different. Trees leaned closer to the road, branches stretching over us like ribs. The pavement got rougher. We didn't see another car for a long stretch. Just us and the woods. And then we saw the truck. Old Ford, dark red, maybe maroon, pulled halfway into a ditch, hazard lights ticking like a slow metronome. Driver's side door open, but no one inside. I slowed down. Theo said, "Don't stop, seriously, just keep moving." But I pulled up next to it anyway. couldn't help myself. The inside of the cab was empty. No keys, no bags, and this awful smell motor oil mixed with something sickly sweet, like syrup that had gone bad in the sun. Theo leaned out the window. "Hey, anyone there?" Silence. After a few seconds, I backed up and drove around it. Neither of us said much after that. Then, maybe 20 minutes later, we saw another car. Different make, different color, but same setup, abandoned, one door open, no sign of the driver. It was starting to feel like a pattern, and not a good one. Theo reached over and turned off the music. We just sat in the quiet for a while. You could hear every creak of the car, every swipe of the wipers. "I want to get off this road," he said eventually. "I would if I could." We kept going. The road twisted and narrowed. Trees pressed in so tight I felt like we were tunneling through them. Then another vehicle. This one had clearly been there for a while. Dusty, half covered in leaves. A blanket still hung out the door like someone had climbed out in a hurry. Theo didn't say anything this time. He didn't have to. I could feel his unease, mine too. Then we saw a sign, "Rest area, 1 mile." I hesitated. "I just need a minute," I said, "just to breathe." The rest area looked like every other forgotten roadside stop. Faded signs, cracked pavement, empty parking lot, no other cars. Just us. Theo headed toward the bathrooms. I stayed near the car, trying to shake this growing pressure in my chest. That's when I noticed the vending machine. The lights were on, humming faintly, but every slot was empty. No candy, no drinks. The spiral coils were missing entirely, like someone had gutted it from the inside out. And then I saw the stickers. Little white labels stuck to the base of the machine and the trash can beside it. I peeled one off and held it up. Case, 28 October 4th, 2:41 p.m., Route 21. That wasn't the kind of sticker you buy at Office Depot. Theo still wasn't back. I walked toward the restroom building, calling his name. No answer. Inside, it was dead silent. The lights overhead buzzed and flickered, casting weird shadows that shifted when I moved. All the stall doors were slightly open, and in each one was a single shoe. Just one. All different. A kid's boot, a women's flat, a muddy sneaker, a dress shoe with the toe scuffed raw. I didn't check the stalls. I didn't want to know what else might be in there. I backed out, walked quickly to the car. The doors were locked, every one of them, including the passenger side that Theo had just gotten out of. I hadn't locked them. My phone had one bar. I called him. Straight to voicemail. No ring. Just that empty silence before the beep. I got in the car and left. I didn't check the mirrors, didn't look back at the rest stop. Just kept driving until I saw signs of life. An actual town, people, gas stations, noise. Civilization. I pulled into the nearest police station, heart still racing, told them everything. The town, the cars, the rest area. They looked at me like I was making it up. Said there's no Route 21 in that part of Tennessee, no town called Willow Creek. I pulled out my phone to show them pictures. I had taken plenty. Theo by the diner, that first truck, even the sticker. But every photo in my gallery was black. Not blank. Just black. They searched. Took statements. Interviewed me for hours. They never found Theo. And then let me go. That was 4 years ago. Since then, every fall, I remember that moment. I was 29 when my cousin Mason and I decided to take a fall road trip through eastern Tennessee, just two guys looking to escape the grind for a few days. He'd quit his warehouse job outside Cincinnati, and I was winding down a freelance contract that drained more brainpower than payment. So when cheap beer and leftovers piled up and nothing called our names, we said, "Let's drive." No destination, really. By the 5th day, we were done with the usual pit stops. Eggs that tasted like cardboard, gas station peanuts, stale sodas. We wanted something else. Something normal, something familiar. Then we saw it. A crooked wooden arrow nailed to a leaning fence seat post that read, Claybrook, 7 miles. No flashing marquee, no chain restaurant sign. Just that arrow, handwritten, pointing into the woods. We looked at each other and shrugged. Let's see what's there. When we pulled into the town, it didn't feel like a proper town. Small doesn't cover it. There were 3 short streets, maybe 20 houses, a laundromat, a bar closed long ago, and one tiny grocery with just a red open sign buzzing in the window. The kind of place you might miss if you weren't paying attention. The car park barely had room to turn around. The trees were leaning close. Something about the way the town held itself felt quiet, snug, watching. We walked into the store because we were hungry and because there was nowhere else. The door made a muffled click. Inside, the air was colder than outside, not refreshing cold, but dry, stale cold, like something had been removed that should have been there. The floor was old linoleum, cracked, peeling at the edges. The lighting was dim, and overhead fluorescent flickering in a lazy rhythm. The shelves were half empty. There were cans with no labels, snack cakes wrapped in thin plastic, a few bottles of soda standing off to one side. The place looked like someone tried to recreate a grocery from a photograph. Mason grabbed a six-pack and some barbecue chips. He turned the corner toward the soda fridge while I drifted down the opposite aisle, just looking. At the far end, I saw them, two men, one at each end of the aisle. I followed their shapes with my eyes, slowly. The first man was in a faded hoodie team logo I didn't recognize. He stood partly turned toward the other guy, but his head stayed fixed on what lay between them. His arms hung slack, but his fingers twitched. Not a normal idle. As if he was counting, or maybe waiting. The second guy was older. Long brown coat, dark cap pulled low over his face. He had that stillness like a statue. Both men were facing that yellow tape strip on the tile floor that ran exactly between them. It looked like Crimacine tape, minus the do not cross. Text yellow, worn, precise. They were both staring at that strip, not each other, not the shelves. I edged closer to Mason, cleared my throat, and whispered, "You see those two?" He squinted at them and said, "Are they in line?" with a dry chuckle. I smiled weakly and shook my head. It didn't feel like a joke. I felt the air change. Then the long God-coated man slowly reached into his jacket. I saw the shape short, dark, hard to tell what it was, too quick to be casual. My stomach lurched. I grabbed Mason's elbow and pulled him behind the checkout counter with me, a move so fast I surprised myself. Then the cracking started. Not a loud boom. A sharp, thin crack, bouncing off shelves and ceiling tiles. I pressed my hands over my ears. Mason crouched next to me, holding a soda bottle tight. The bottle's label crinkled under his grip. I noticed how his eyes had gone flat. No blinking, just focus. The store's lighting flickered. I tried not to breathe too loud. Shot after shot echoed. 3, 5, then a pause. Then more. The noise ricocheted, distorted by the small space. Some bottle smashed toward the back. I heard the plastic shards, the sliding metal can, and then silence. Silence that felt heavy. I peeked up. Both men were gone. No abrupt door slam. No firefight. No wounded. Just empty air and scattered groceries. The yellow tape strip still lay in the middle of the aisle as though nothing had happened. The cashier was under the counter, shaking slightly, whispering to himself. I didn't wait to find out what he was saying. I pulled Mason by the shoulder and dragged him out the door. The outside light felt wrong. Flat, gray, everything bleached. We got into the car and peeled away. The engine's hum was too loud in that moment. We didn't talk. Not until we hit a diner 30 miles down the road. There, Mason asked the questions. What was that? A robbery? Some feud? I shrugged. I still don't know. Something didn't sit right. The two men, the tape line, the precision of everything. It was as if we walked into a scene that was meant to repeat, not happen by chance. 3 days later, I tried to find Claybrook again. I traced our route step by step. I slowed the speed, looked for that arrow sign. Nothing. The fancy post was gone. The town, gone. Just trees lining the road and occasional trailers. I checked my GPS history. No track. I typed the name into the search bar. Nothing found. Mason rolled his eyes and said maybe we were sleep-deprived or hungry. Blame the road trip. I kept quiet. I still had the receipt from the store. No name, no address. Just a time stamp in faint red ink, October 21st, 7:44 p.m. It sits folded in my wallet. Not as proof of anything. More like a marker. A reminder. That day, traveling roads unmarked can bring you somewhere real or somewhere not meant for you. Now, when I'm back home and the daily grind settles in, every so often I reach into my wallet and pull out that receipt. I feel the weight of it in my hand. I remember how cold the store was, how the two men didn't shop, how that yellow line glowed faint under the flicker of the light. I remember Mason's blank stare and how fast we ran. I don't think about that town to scare myself. That night I promised myself I'd stop looking for Claybrook. My cousin Milo had just come back from a deployment overseas, and I'd finally walked away from a job that had been draining the life out of me for years. Neither of us had much going on, no deadlines, no real plans, so we figured we'd take a long road trip through the Appalachians. October felt right for it, cool enough to roll the windows down, warm enough to sleep in the car if we had to. We didn't set a strict route. That was the whole point. Just small towns, winding roads, and as many off-the-beaten-path diners as we could find. Milo brought a beat-up camera with a few extra rolls of film. I packed a stack of old road maps. No interstates. That was our only rule. About 5 days in, somewhere deep in the West Virginia backcountry, everything just dropped off. No signal, no GPS, not even a flicker of service. The road narrowed to the point where it felt like we were driving down someone's private lane. Trees thick on both sides, barely enough sunlight breaking through. The map showed a path that supposedly linked two nearby towns, so we figured we'd keep going and reconnect to a highway eventually. Then we came across the bridge. It looked out of place. Steel guardrails, asphalt that looked freshly poured. Too modern for the broken-down road we'd been on. It wasn't on the map, which was strange, but it pointed the right way, and daylight was already slipping, so we crossed it. Right after the bridge, we spotted a small spread of houses through the trees. 6, maybe 7. All set wide apart like someone had tried to build a neighborhood and then gave up halfway through. The road was falling apart, cracked, overgrown, barely even a road at that point. There was a guy sitting out front of one of the houses, just sitting there in a faded lawn chair, arms crossed, watching us. Didn't wave, didn't smile. Milo gave him a nod, the kind you give strangers to be polite, and the guy nodded back once. His house didn't have a mailbox, no curtains in the windows, no lights on. We kept going, quiet, but the next town never came. Instead, the road just curled and bent and dropped us right back where we started. Same little group of houses. Same guy in the chair. Still watching us. Milo and I looked at each other. No words. Just that quick check-in you do when you both know something's off. We turned around and tried again. Same thing. Same houses. Same chair guy. No change. Not even a flicker. We ran that loop 3 times before we finally pulled over. Milo spread out the map on the hood and tried to match landmarks, streams, elevation lines, anything that made sense, but nothing added up. It was like we'd slid off the grid. That's when we figured we'd talk to the guy. He introduced himself as Ernie, probably mid-40s. Thick forearms, a patchy beard, and one eye that didn't quite line up with the other. He had this slow, polite way of speaking, like he was picking his words carefully. He said he'd been living there a while. When we asked why the road kept looping, he just shrugged and said, "It's not supposed to lead back here anymore. They rerouted it, but sometimes it still folds wrong." We thought he was being poetic or weirdly local about it, just some small-town cryptic talk. Milo laughed. I smiled. We asked how to get out. "You got to wait it out," Ernie said. "Drive too much, it loops worse." We asked if he had a phone. He didn't. "Anyone else nearby?" He paused. "Sort of. We parked a little way past his place and slept in the car that night. The plan was to leave at first light." Milo barely slept, kept checking the mirrors like he was expecting someone to come out of the trees. I dozed off and woke up once around 3 a.m. Something made me open my eyes. There was a shape standing at the edge of the woods, just inside the high beams. It didn't move. It didn't feel like it was looking at us exactly, but it knew we were there. By morning it was gone, and so was Ernie. His chair sat empty. Same position. Same angle. House looked exactly the same, like no one had ever been inside it. That's when the uneasiness really kicked in. Not fear exactly, but that slow, creeping dread. Like something fundamental was misaligned. We weren't just lost. We were stuck. Sometime around noon, this guy came walking down the road toward us. Tall, thin, with wire-rimmed glasses. He looked normal at first glance, but the longer you looked, the more it didn't sit right. His clothes looked borrowed, too clean. Didn't hang right on his frame. His face was blank, not in a creepy way, just paused, like he hadn't decided how to look yet. He introduced himself as Glenn, said he lived up past the ridge. He offered to show us a way out, but said it wouldn't be by road. We'd have to hike. Milo asked why no one else used that trail. Glenn shrugged. Not everyone remembers it's there. That line stuck with me. We left the car, grabbed a couple bottles of water and some granola bars, and followed him. The forest got dense quick. Air felt heavy and still. Glenn moved fast without really looking like he was trying. At one point I stopped to catch my breath and realized he wasn't sweating, not even a little. About 30 minutes in, we reached this shallow gully full of moss-covered stones. Glenn pointed through a break in the trees. Said that used to be the town. What town? I asked. The one you're trying to get to, he said. But they moved it in the 40s. Moved it. He didn't explain, just nodded like that should make sense. Milo whispered, He's messing with us. No one moves a whole town. I agreed, but Glenn was already walking ahead. We stepped through the clearing, and immediately something shifted. Not darker, not lighter, just flatter, like all the color had been gently scrubbed out of the air. And there it was, rows of old foundations. No houses left, just outlines, concrete steps, sunken corners, scattered bricks. But here's the weird part. It was clean, like someone had been sweeping through regularly. No weeds, no trash, not even leaves. Glenn walked to the center and stopped, turned to us and said, It's better if you go the rest of the way alone. Then he turned and walked into the trees. We called after him. Nothing. So we walked. 15 minutes later we hit pavement. Actual pavement. Yellow lines. A few passing cars. Civilization. We didn't say anything, just stood there for a minute, taking it in, then found a gas station with a diner attached and didn't stop moving until we had hot coffee in front of us. Later, we tried pulling the place up on satellite maps. Nothing. No record of the road, the houses, any of it. We even searched names. Ernie, Glenn, that move town idea. But it was like the area didn't exist. Except for one post, buried in some old hiking forum. From over 10 years ago. Someone wrote that they lost 4 days in a hollow near the Virginia border and were guided out by a man who moved like he didn't belong to time. Signed at the bottom, Mitchell Overland. I showed it to Milo. He just stared at the screen for a while, then shut the laptop. We never talked about it again. I got a job back in Pennsylvania. Milo moved out west. And I stay away from anything that heads south. This happened a couple years ago during a solo road trip I took through the Appalachians. I'd been working way too many hours that fall, barely seeing daylight between my shifts in my apartment. One morning, I just decided I needed out, real out. So I grabbed my gear, loaded up the car, and pointed it east. I didn't have much of a plan beyond hike, sleep, repeat. It was early October. That stretch when the weather still holds out, but you can feel the cold creeping in at night. I figured the trails would be quieter, the campsites emptier, and the whole trip a little easier to navigate without summer crowds. I wasn't wrong, but quiet doesn't always mean peaceful. Somewhere around day 4, I veered off my original route after finding a random comment in this old hiking forum. Someone mentioned an overlook near a place called Braden Hollow, said it had the kind of view that made you stop talking. There wasn't much detail, just a vague direction and a trail name I didn't recognize. That sort of thing always pulls me in, so I rerouted through. Braden Hollow turned out to be the kind of town you only notice when you've already passed it. There was one gas station, one boarded-up diner, and what looked like the remnants of a hardware store. I stopped to top off the tank and stretch my legs. The gas pump was ancient and didn't take cards, so I went inside to pay. The guy behind the counter looked like he'd been thawed out of a long nap. Barely glanced at me. While I was paying, I asked if there were any decent places to set up camp around there. He kind of grunted, scratched the back of his neck, then said something like, There's an old forest road, used to be state-maintained. About 6, maybe 7 miles out. Not much traffic out there. Good spot if you want quiet. Sounded like a win to me. I scribbled down the directions and hit the road. It got rough almost immediately. The road wasn't so much a road as a deeply scarred path through thick woods. Trees leaned close from both sides, and the gravel gave way to hard dirt full of ruts and overgrown edges. The kind of place where cell service vanishes before you even realize it. At one point, I'd passed a truck parked just off the shoulder. Faded blue, a layer of dust coating the windshield. It was angled weird, like someone had pulled in quick and never left. I slowed down just enough to see that it was empty. No movement inside, no gear around it. Just parked. About 15 minutes deeper in, the trees opened up into this wide clearing. Big enough to park, flat enough to set up camp, and right on the edge of a bluff. I couldn't even describe the view properly. You could see ridge lines stacking into the distance, like waves of dark green and ash blue rolling into each other. I stood there a while, just looking. Eventually, I'd pitched my tent near the tree line, made a quick dinner out of jerky and trail mix, and settled in with a paperback I'd been trying to finish for months. By the time dusk settled in, I hadn't seen or heard a single other person. That changed when I heard the knock. It was sharp, 2 quick raps, like knuckles on wood. I looked up fast, thinking maybe someone had pulled in without me noticing, but there was no car. No footsteps, just woods behind me. I stood up, called out something like, "Hey, you okay?" No response. The trees back there were dense pine, and the undergrowth had that wiry, tangled look that makes even a small animal hard to spot. I walked toward the sound, sweeping my flashlight side to side, trying not to convince myself I was being paranoid. Nothing moved. Not even a squirrel or the rustle of leaves, just dead still. I waited another minute, then went back to the fire. That's when I saw the car door. It was cracked open. Driver's side. Not wide, just enough that the interior light had kicked on. I hadn't touched it since parking. My backpack, which I left on the passenger seat, looked shifted, not rummaged through. More like someone had moved it slightly, enough to make me notice. The hair on the back of my neck went stiff. I checked the trunk, the ground around the tent, looked for footprints or anything off. But the dirt was too dry and packed to hold a clear print. Nothing looked taken, nothing damaged. And then I saw it. On the hood of my car was a white ceramic coffee mug. Plain, no design. Sitting perfectly centered. I don't drink coffee. I don't even own a mug like that. For some reason, I picked it up without thinking. And it was warm. Like someone had just finished whatever was in it. I froze, holding it, every inch of me suddenly on edge. I turned slowly, scanning the trees again. I hadn't heard anyone approach. No car, no footsteps, no twigs snapping. Just this mug. I placed it on the ground and got in the car, locking the doors. The tent could stay. My gear could stay. My gear could stay. I didn't care. I sat there, lights off, engine off, trying to hear anything. At some point, I don't know when, I must have nodded off. My head jerked upright when I heard the tapping. Not knocking this time. Lighter. Rhythmic. Fingernails on glass. Tap. 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 I turned slowly toward the passenger window and saw her. A woman, pale face, short brown hair. She looked about mid-30s, maybe older. Her eyes weren't focused on me, more like she was staring through me or past me. Her mouth was slightly open, and she just stood there, tapping with one finger. No expression. No urgency. I cracked the window a few inches, asked if she needed help. She didn't answer at first. Just blinked slowly, then said, "He's in the woods. I left him there." I asked who. She didn't look at me, just stared down and mumbled, "I can't go back. You shouldn't be here." Then she turned and walked into the trees. No flashlight. No gear. Nothing on her at all. Just vanished into the darkness like she knew exactly where she was going. I waited, stunned. Then I called out to her, quietly at first, then louder, shined my flashlight in the direction she'd gone. There was nothing, not a sound, not a shadow. I didn't follow. I turned on the car, backed out of that clearing as fast as I could without blowing a tire, and left the tent and everything else behind. At the bottom of the forest road, I saw the blue truck again. Only this time, there was a fire going near it. It was small and low, but definitely burning. Right beside it, a single camping chair. And in the chair, something, or someone, was sitting. I slowed the car, leaning slightly to see through the windshield. Balanced on the armrest was the same white coffee mug. I floored it. Didn't stop driving until I reached a bigger town with lights, people, and cell service. Parked in front of a 24-hour diner and just sat there for a while, heart still pounding. Eventually, I called the ranger station and told them what I'd seen. Gave them the directions, told them about the woman, even mentioned the truck. They said they'd check it out, but didn't find anything. Cale was always the one who organized our fall road trips. Ever since high school, it had kind of been our thing. We used to joke that the trips were the only time we ever actually talked anymore. No family dinners, no holiday visits, just a yearly reset us, the road, and the static buzz of backwoods AM stations. The year everything changed. Cale said he'd found something new. He was vague about it, even for him. Just said he wanted to go deeper this time. He kept bringing up this old, unofficial mountain route that he'd read about, or heard about maybe from someone. He called it the Spine. Said it twisted through a stretch of the southern Blue Walk Ridge that barely made it onto maps. He said locals still used it, but they didn't like talking about it. I figured it was just him being dramatic. Cale loved that kind of stuff. Folklore, weird roadside attractions, abandoned stuff. He once took a 3-hour detour just to find a dried-up spring that some website said was haunted by a thirsty ghost. He picked me up early, real early, before sunrise. Same old Subaru, same dent in the back bumper from that summer. He clipped a mailbox trying to reverse uphill. He was smiling like always, cup of burnt gas station coffee in one hand, the other resting on the wheel like he'd been waiting there all night. But the back of the car was already loaded, more than usual. There were extra blankets, a weird amount of canned food, this heavy-duty water filter he definitely didn't own last year, and a bundle of clothes that didn't match anything I'd ever seen him wear, muted green, kind of military-looking. I asked him what it was all for. He said, in case we stay longer this time. I assumed he meant an extra day, maybe 2. I didn't ask again. The first day felt like all the others, dumb music, louder laughter, and a kind of ease I hadn't felt in months. We took turns driving, switching off whenever we hit a town big enough to have a decent diner. We pulled over to take pictures of cows, mailboxes shaped like bears, a single shoe hanging from a telephone wire. Everything felt familiar in that nostalgic, this is our thing kind of way. By the second day, we were off the interstates. He started taking roads that weren't even marked with route numbers, just faded signs and local names, Hickory Trace, Saddle Run, Devlin's Fork. By the third night, it started feeling off. Not scary, just quiet in a way that didn't sit right. The towns we passed looked like they hadn't been touched in years. No lights in the windows. No cars on the roads. A gas station where the cashier never looked up once while we stood at the counter. Another where the pumps didn't work at all. We stopped at a place that only sold jerky and chewing tobacco and had a calendar on the wall from 2 years ago. I chalked it up to being rural. Isolated. Cale didn't say much. He just kept driving. We passed this white wooden church built practically into the woods, tight like the trees had grown around it. He slowed down when we passed, not dramatically, just enough for me to notice. He didn't say anything, but I saw the way he stared at it. His eyes didn't blink. I asked if he'd seen it before. He said, sort of. That was the only answer I got. After that, he stopped using the GPS altogether. No phone. No map apps. He pulled out this folded paper map from the glove box. Looked handmade. Red ink lines running across it like veins, twisting through valleys and dead ends. I saw names scribbled in the margins. Not towns. Not even words that made sense. Stuff like Room of Dust, Hollow of Teeth, St. Avers. I tried to Google them. Nothing came up. He told me to stop looking. From then on, we didn't stay in motels anymore. No campgrounds either. He'd just pull off onto dirt roads or up into gravel clearings that felt more like animal trails than human spaces. One night, we slept beside an abandoned billboard with no text on it. Another night, he set up our tent between 2 fallen trees in a place that smelled like wet stones and metal. I started waking up in the middle of the night even when I was dead tired. No dreams. Just that sudden bolt-awake feeling, like someone had slammed a door miles away and had somehow traveled through the earth and into my chest. Cale was always outside when I woke up, walking, barefoot, circling the car. His footsteps made no sound, just the leaves shifting a little under him, steady and slow. When I finally asked what he was doing, he didn't look at me, just said, checking for signs. Making sure they're not close yet. I laughed, sort of. He didn't. By the fifth night, I snapped. Told him I was done with whatever the hell this was. I wanted normal food. I wanted to sleep somewhere with walls. I wanted to hear a radio station that didn't cut out every 5 minutes or play hymns in languages I didn't recognize. He just looked at me, not angry, not confused, just calm. You really don't feel it yet? He asked, like I was the one behind, like I was missing the point. That night, we stopped at the ridge. There was no sign, no label, just a small gravel pull-off and an overlook that stretched out over the valley. I'll admit it was beautiful. All misty blues and rust-colored treetops stretched like a quilt over the hills. I stood at the edge, trying to breathe it in. He went to the trunk and pulled out a wooden cross. Looked hand-carved. He carried it over and started hammering it into the ground with a stone he picked up from the shoulder. I asked what the hell he was doing. He smiled. It's my mark, he said. Means I've been claimed. He said it like he was proud. Then he started humming. Low. Slow. Something without a rhythm, like it didn't belong to any song I'd ever heard. He told me he learned it from the hollow. That's when I understood. He'd been out here before. Alone. And he never told me. The next morning, I tried to leave. Told him I was walking if I had to. He just reached into the front seat and handed me a letter. It had my full name on the front. Full name, middle and all. Inside it said, if you're reading this, you've seen the ridge. You've been marked. They'll call to you too, in time. Don't fight it. It's why we're made. No signature. No signature. No explanation. Just a date written at the bottom 2 years earlier. I stared at him. He didn't say a word. I wanted to walk. I really did. But I didn't know which way we'd come from anymore. The map was gone. The phone battery was dead. Every direction looked the same. Trees and hills and sky folded over each other like the same pattern repeating. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat in the car with the door cracked open, foot on the ground like I could bolt at any second. Cale was outside, sitting cross-legged in the dirt, whispering into the woods, not to me. Not even really to himself, like he was talking to something that wasn't there. I could see his breath every time he spoke. It wasn't cold. In the morning, he was gone. No footprints. No broken branches. Just his shoes, neatly placed beside the cross. The wood had blackened overnight, like it had burned without fire. I waited for hours. 6, maybe 7. Then I got in the car and drove. I haven't taken a road trip since. I don't camp. I don't drive in the Blue Walk Ridge in October. And when I see churches tucked against the trees with no signs out front, I keep going. Last Tuesday, someone left a letter at my door, just my full name on the envelope. Inside was one line, "It's your turn now." My cousin Lainey had just gotten out of a drawn-out, pretty draining relationship. Once it was finally over, she called me one night and said, "I just need to be somewhere else for a while. Not dramatic, not broken-hearted, just emotionally exhausted." We were both overdue for a break, honestly, so we threw together a rough plan, a road trip through the Blue Ridge and into southern Appalachia. Fall colors, no itinerary, no pressure. We packed the basics, took our SUV, and just headed south. We had a physical map we'd marked up with little circles around towns we'd heard about through friends or saw in travel blogs. Nothing fancy, just the kind of places where the main event is a scenic overlook or a diner with decent pie. Our plan was just to meander and not think too hard. By the third day, we'd gotten into that part of Western Virginia where the trees start to feel taller and the roads thinner. The GPS cut out somewhere in the early afternoon, and we hadn't seen another car in at least an hour. It was one of those stretches where you start wondering if you missed a turn, even though you know you didn't. We'd been following the same road for miles. Then we saw it, a gas station or something that used to be one. It sat just off a bend in the road, surrounded by dense trees. The sign above the door read, "Fuel and Groceries," in white, cracked lettering on a rust-red board. No brand, just one lone pump out front, tilted slightly like the concrete underneath had sunk a bit. We didn't exactly need gas, but we figured we could at least ask someone if we were headed in the right direction. Laney wanted to check if we were still on track toward a place called Halder's Knob, one of the towns we'd circled. There weren't any cars in the lot, no lights on. But the front door was stuck open, jammed in place with a cinder block, so we went in. The inside smelled like old wood and dust. Some of the shelves had canned goods, but most were half empty or just stacked with things like outdated flyers and odd little trinkets. It felt like a store that hadn't decided whether it was closed for good or just neglected. Behind the counter sat a man older, maybe late 60s. Weathered face, pale blue eyes. He didn't move when we came in. Didn't nod, didn't speak. Just stared like he'd been mid-thought and we interrupted him. Laney, always more social than me, said, "Hi, we were just wondering if Halder's Knob is still ahead. We're not sure if we missed it." There was a pause. Too long, honestly. Then he said, "You're close enough to skip it," and smiled. Not wide. Just this tight, dry grin like he knew something we didn't. We both kind of chuckled, the way you do when you're uncomfortable but don't want to show it. Laney thanked him, and we left without saying much else. As we pulled out, she muttered, "Okay, weird vibes," and I nodded. But then, just a few minutes down the road, we passed a green sign, Halder's Knob, 2 miles. We looked at each other, both thinking the same thing. We hadn't turned, hadn't looped around. We were going straight the whole time. Still, it was on the list, and we were getting tired of driving, so we figured we'd at least check it out. The town was small. One main strip with a dozen buildings at most, post office, auto shop, tiny diner, and a single motel that looked like it hadn't been updated since the 80s. But everything seemed functional. A few porch lights on, smoke coming from a diner's chimney, that sort of thing. The motel didn't have a name that we could see, just a red neon vacancy sign that blinked too fast. We parked out front, and a woman at the desk handed us a room key without much small talk. Heavy key, made of metal. Not even a plastic tag on it, just bare and cold in my hand. She said the diner next door would close soon if we wanted to eat. We nodded, dropped our bags in the room, and walked over. The diner looked like something out of a postcard at first. Old booths, warm lights, small counter. But then you started noticing the details. There were 3 other people inside, all sitting alone. All eating what looked like the same thing, some kind of thick brown stew on white plates. None of them looked up when we walked in. Not even a glance. The woman behind the counter didn't ask what we wanted. She gave a small nod and disappeared into the kitchen. I started to say something, but Laney leaned over and whispered, "Why are they all chewing the same way?" I looked again. She was right. Same slow pace, same robotic rhythm. Bite, chew, pause. None of them moved their heads. Just eyes down, methodical. We got our food maybe 5 minutes later. Same stew. It smelled like beef, but tasted more like salt and copper. Nothing identifiable in it, no visible meat or vegetables. Just this mushy brown mix. We ate just enough to be polite, left cash on the table, and headed out. As we pushed open the diner door, I looked back. All 3 diners had turned in their seats, slowly, and were staring right at us, still chewing. We didn't talk much on the walk back. Once inside the room, I triple-checked the lock and shut the curtains tight. I remember saying, "Let's just get some sleep and go early," and Laney agreed without hesitation. Sometime after midnight, I woke up with this odd sensation like warmth outside the window. Not bright, but flickering. I lifted the edge of the curtain. There was a fire. Small bonfire in the parking lot right behind the office. Around it, maybe 12 people, just standing, not moving. No talking, just silhouettes facing the flames, still and upright. I couldn't recognize any of them, not the diners, not the desk clerk, but their postures were weirdly identical, like mannequins. I woke Laney up and showed her. She stared for a second, then whispered, "That's our car." They were standing around it, forming a loose ring, not touching anything, just there. I told her to stay in the room, that I'd go down to the office and figure out what was happening. But when I got there, the place was pitch black, empty. Name at the desk, no sign anyone had been there all day. The phone was disconnected, literally cut at the base. I ran back, heart pounding, and we grabbed our stuff in under a minute. We slipped out through the back exit and cut across the lot, staying low behind parked cars. When we reached ours, the fire was gone. The people were gone. But where the fire had been, there was this perfect black ring of ash. And around the car, a scatter of footprints. Dozens of them all barefoot, some small, like kids, some too wide or too long. They formed a spiral, tightening around our vehicle. That was it. We got in and left. Fast. Didn't even buckle our seat belts until we'd made it miles down the road. No music. Just silence and highway until we hit a real town with a 7-Eleven and working streetlights. We pulled into a Waffle House sometime after 3 in the morning. Sat there for a long time, just trying to believe we were back in the world we recognized. Mara and I had taken this road trip through the Appalachian region. Just a loose plan, 2 weeks off, looping through Tennessee, West Virginia, a bit of Kentucky. Nothing rigid. Just drive, stop wherever it felt right, take photos, eat weird gas station snacks, repeat. It was that kind of trip. She was really into photographing abandoned places and things. Old diners with letters missing from the signs, rusted playgrounds, mossy roadside shrines. Stuff most people wouldn't even glance at. That day we'd been driving a long stretch without seeing another car, let alone a town. The trees were in full-on fire mode, bright orange, deep red, with that first bite of October cold settling in. It was one of those days where your hands stay cold no matter what you do, and the car heater keeps fogging up the windows. We passed this old cracked wooden sign on the side of the road, Haywood Trail Access, half covered in weeds. You could have blinked and missed it. Of course, Mara wanted to stop. She said it looked forgotten in a good way. Whatever that meant. She wanted to see if there was an overlook or an old structure worth photographing. The road turned to gravel, then dipped hard downhill. It felt like we were driving into somewhere we weren't supposed to be. Trees leaned in close, branches brushing the sides of the car like they hadn't been trimmed in years. We only made it maybe half a mile before the path just gave up. It ended in a kind of makeshift turnaround with a half-collapsed gate. No signs, no maps, nothing official looking. Just a wide dirt trail heading off into the trees. She was out of the car with her camera before I even turned off the engine. I stayed put, checked my phone, no bars. Not surprising. I leaned out the window and yelled for her to make it quick. She waved a hand without looking back and disappeared into the woods. At first, I just sat there, listening to the ticking engine and the quiet. No bird song, no wind. Just that dead stillness that makes your skin crawl a little, even if you don't know why. 10 minutes passed, then 15. I honked once. Nothing. I got out, walked to the gate, called her name. It felt like the trees swallowed the sound. No answer. I stepped past the gate and followed the trail a bit, just far enough to feel like I was doing something useful. There were these old stone steps, barely visible, half swallowed by dirt and leaves. A little farther in, I saw what looked like a broken concrete slab, like maybe there'd been a fire tower or picnic shelter once, a long time ago. Everything was just still. I shouted her name again. That's when I heard it. Help me. It was faint, really faint, really faint. Not like someone yelling for help. It was softer, flatter, like a voice coming through a wall. I turned in a full circle, trying to pin down the direction, but it didn't seem to come from where Mara had gone. It was farther down the trail, off to the side maybe? I told myself maybe she'd slipped or done turned around. I mean, it's not like she was carrying bear spray or even water. I walked toward the voice. The trail started feeling weird. It wasn't obvious at first, just little things. The way the slope didn't match the way my feet landed, like each step was a bit too short or too long. And the silence never changed. No underbrush rustling, no squirrels, not even wind in the trees. The voice came again, same words, same tone. Help me, please. I kept going. I think part of me expected to round a bend and see her sitting on a rock, annoyed I was taking so long. Instead, the trail dipped down into a shallow gully. From the ridge, I saw someone standing at the bottom. I slowed. It was too far to see details, but the shape was wrong. I thought for a second it could be her. Maybe her coat looked different in the light, but something about the stillness was off. Then it lifted one arm and waved. I stopped cold. It wasn't a normal wave. The way the arm moved, like it bent in places it shouldn't bend. Like it was practicing the movement, not doing it naturally. Just stiff and mechanical. I didn't wave back. The figure stood still for another second, then slid behind a tree. Not walked, slid. I turned around and started walking back, not running. just walking with purpose, like I hadn't seen anything strange. Like I wasn't feeling that rising tightness in my chest. When I got back to the car, Mara still wasn't there, but the driver's side door was open. That stopped me. I remembered shutting it, blocking it even. Her camera was gone. So was her phone. I called her name again, louder this time. Then I heard it. Help me. Same voice. Same tone. But this time it sounded exactly like her. I mean exactly. Same softness, same rhythm. But the direction was wrong. It sounded like it was coming from beneath the ground, or inside something, like a recording being played from under the car. I didn't answer. I got in, locked the doors, and sat very still. The voice came again, repeating. Always the same words. Help me. Sometimes too fast, like someone had hit repeat by accident. Sometimes with long gaps, like it was waiting to see if I'd respond. It didn't sound desperate anymore. It sounded calculated, like it was trying to get the intonation right, like it was learning how to sound like her. I tried the ignition. Nothing. Just a sputter and a click. I tried again. Same thing. I glanced in the rearview mirror and I swear I saw something. Not walking. Sliding down the middle of the trail toward the car. A figure, low to the ground. Like it wasn't using legs at all. I opened the glove box, grabbed the flashlight, and crawled into the back seat. Covered myself with the emergency blanket we kept for camping. My heart was in my throat, and my hands wouldn't stop shaking. I tried dialing 911. No bars. I stayed there, not moving, barely breathing, just listening. The voice got louder, closer. It was right outside the car now. Then the handle jiggled. I held my breath. My body went still in that way it does when you're not even sure your heartbeat is safe to make noise. Silence. Then something brushed against the back window. I couldn't tell what. A hand? A sleeve? It made a soft scraping sound, like fabric against glass. And then the front driver's side door opened. I heard the creak of it, then the weight of something settling into the seat. No breathing. No movement. Just this pressure in the air, like someone sitting there waiting. Then I heard Mara's voice. Not near the car, inside it. Inches from me. You drove us here. She said it twice. No change in tone. No emotion. Just a playback. Like someone hit repeat on a recording. And then nothing. No sound. No movement. I stayed under that blanket, muscles locked, eyes squeezed shut, all the way until the sun started coming through the trees and the birds began chirping again. When I finally worked up the nerve to look, the seat was empty. I drove that car down the trail on fumes. Hands clenched so tight around the wheel I left nail marks in the steering. I flagged down a logging truck near the highway. Could barely get the words out to explain what happened. Mara was never found. They searched the woods, brought dogs, helicopters, nothing, no trace. Her family still calls me sometimes, but there's nothing I can say that doesn't sound insane. I was 20 when it happened. Maya and I had planned the trip as a break from everything. School was draining that semester, assignments piling up, back-to-back midterms, constant group projects that never really felt like group work. So when fall break came around, we decided to get out of town. Not for a party or a trip home, just out. Out. Somewhere quieter, somewhere weird. We packed her old silver Civic with whatever we thought we might need. Snacks, sleeping bags, a tent neither of us had ever actually set up before, a little camping stove she found in her dad's garage, and a playlist we never even got around to playing. Our plan was barely a plan, just a vague idea of driving around eastern Tennessee and hitting some of the abandoned towns and hiking spots we'd seen mentioned online. Maya had found the thread about old mining settlements scattered through the backwoods. Most had been empty for decades. Some were supposedly haunted, others just forgotten by time. It sounded like the kind of thing we could handle. We figured we'd camp near a trail, take some cool photos, maybe post something cryptic for Halloween. It wasn't about proving anything. We just wanted something different, something to cut through the blur of classes and cafeteria food and fluorescent lit lecture halls. The first day was uneventful. We passed through a couple of half-dead towns, one with a diner that had a giant plastic moose outside for no reason, another that seemed to be populated entirely by people over 70. We laughed a lot. It felt like we were on the edge of something adventurous. Late in the afternoon, Maya suggested we take a detour off our loosely plotted route. She'd found a comment online that mentioned a small, unnamed road cutting through an area called Dalton Ridge. Apparently, if you followed it long enough, it would take you near an old, collapsed mining town no one really talked about anymore. The directions were vague, just a few reference points. Past the fire tower, before the second bridge, look for a split in the trees. That kind of thing. By the time we turned onto the road, her phone had already lost signal. The GPS froze a few minutes in, stuck on a location we passed miles earlier, but she kept saying it was just ahead. We passed a second bridge, then a third. No fire tower. The road narrowed until it barely felt like a real road at all. Just cracked pavement and creeping vines that looked like they were trying to pull it back into the forest. Eventually, we stopped to make food. There was a gravel pull-out that didn't look like it belonged to anything. No signs, no picnic table, just a spot where the trees gave up and the ground flattened enough to park. A busted wooden sign stood nearby, sun-bleached and unreadable. Maybe it had once said something important, but now it just leaned into the brush like it had given up trying to be helpful. I set up the burner on the hood and started heating some instant ramen while Maya wandered off into the trees. She didn't go far, 30, maybe 40 feet, but the trees were thick and she disappeared fast. I could still hear her, though. Or I thought I could. Leaves crunching, twigs snapping, the occasional beep of her phone camera. When she came back, she looked different. Her posture was stiffer, and her smile didn't quite reach her eyes. I asked if she was okay, and she said, yeah, just cold. She kept glancing back at the trees, though, like she'd forgotten something. Not panicked, not scared, just unsettled, like her brain was trying to replay something it hadn't quite registered. We ended up sleeping in the car. The tent was a disaster, missing a pole, of course, and the ground was hard and lumpy with roots. It dropped to near freezing that night, and even with the windows cracked, it felt like we were sleeping inside a tin can buried in ice. I parked near a ridge where the forest opened up just a bit, giving us a view down into a dark, empty hollow. No lights, no movement, just a stretch of absolute nothingness that felt too wide, like the world was hollowed out past the edge of the trees. Somewhere around 3 a.m, I woke up to the dome light flickering on. Not full brightness, just a dull battery-saving glow that painted everything in washed-out beige. Maya was sitting upright in the passenger seat, completely still, staring at the glove box like she was waiting for it to open. Her hands were shaking. Not violently, but steady, rhythmic, like she was freezing from the inside out. I said her name. Nothing. I leaned toward her and said it again, a little louder. That's when she whispered. I heard tapping. I sat up fully, heart already picking up speed. Where? She didn't answer at first. Then, almost too quietly to hear, on my window. I looked outside, nothing but black. The kind of black that eats light. I cracked the door, stepped out with my flashlight, and circled the car. My boots crunched on the gravel, but nothing else moved. No wind, no animals, just the sound of my own breath. No footprints around the car, no marks on the glass. But still, I felt watched. Not threatened exactly, just seen. Maya didn't fall back asleep after that. She didn't even recline her seat. She sat upright until sunrise, arms crossed tightly over her chest like she was trying to compress herself into something smaller. In the morning, I tried to call it. I said we should head back, maybe get a cheap motel in one of the towns with actual people. But Maya was insistent. We're close, she said. It's only a few miles. I didn't argue. I should have. But her voice had this edge to it, like she needed to see it. Not wanted, needed. We drove in silence. Trees thickened. The road shrank. Then, after about 40 minutes, the landscape opened again. The ghost town, if you could call it that, was barely a clearing. A creek ran through a collapsed bridge. Stone foundations poked up from overgrown grass like forgotten teeth. The rusted husk of a coal cart sat half-sunk in the mud. Nothing moved. The only structure still standing was a squat, slanted shed maybe 10 feet across, padlocked and leaning sideways like it was trying to fall without being noticed. Maya didn't get out of the car. Not even when I opened her door and asked her to. She looked at the trees, not the building. I've been here before, she said. I froze. What? She didn't answer, just hugged her arms and stared at the same patch of forest like it might blink. I got out and walked to the shed. The door was scratched, long gouges that didn't follow any real pattern. Too low to be from a person, too deep for an animal I could think of. The hinges were rusted, so I kicked it in. Dust. Junk. Shelves that had collapsed under their own weight. A propane tank with illegible labeling. Something soft and black in the corner that might have been a shoe. Then I heard Maya scream. I ran. Fast. Nearly tripped on the uneven ground. She was outside the car, standing stiff by the passenger door, pointing. Her hand was shaking, but her eyes were locked on something between the trees. I saw someone, she said, crouching. I looked. Nothing. But the way she said it, so sure, so small, it made something in me go still. We got in the car. I locked the doors. On the way out, she finally spoke. She told me what she'd seen back at that pullout. Not just the trees, not just photos. She found something hanging from a branch wire twisted through a piece of bone, a vertebra maybe. Small, probably animal. But beneath it, in the dirt, were shoe prints. Her size, her exact boots. Same treads. But they'd been there before she walked in. And that night, it wasn't tapping she heard. It was her own voice, whispering outside the window. Let me in. Flat, off key, off key. Tired. Like someone imitating her badly but with confidence. We didn't talk after that. Drove until we hit a main road with gas stations and traffic. When I dropped her off in Franklin, she didn't even say goodbye. Just got out and walked away.